Um, so the together waiting idea is just, again, to give us a place to be together. What we've noticed through it's really 9 months of COVID now. We're into the 10th month, if we can imagine that, coming up.
Mm.
That
Mm.
we've heard the old adage. I don't know that I like it so much, but when a door closes, God opens a window. Clearly, what we've seen, and you've seen rolling out in our 2021 ministry plan, is that we have seen how the church is able to exist online, and for many people, that is an entry point to the church and to a relationship with God. And we're wanting to get better and better at that, and this strangely has created opportunities. And so we're going to keep working at this. What I want to share with you today, we're going to talk about gratitude, and I'm going to just share my screen in a little prayer that a thought about a prayer from a guy named Meister Eckhart. If the only prayer you said was thank you, that would be enough. I like this little prayer for our reflection because I'm thankful for you all taking time to reach out and do this. Not everybody's comfortable in an online world where we've made huge strides as a population across the United States and in the church. And I think this can really, really work in a way where God is active in our lives. I also like this quote. You may or may not be aware, but in Christian history, this guy, he lived 700 years ago. He was a Catholic priest in Germany that was excommunicated, but has come into his own as someone who God really worked through in beautiful ways. The historical thread that I find most fascinating, and I want to spend some time researching it this coming year, is that the priest who influenced Martin Luther was a guy named Johann von Staupitz. He did quite a bit of writing and reflecting on this Meister Eckhart, who had lived over 100 years before von Staupitz. And a very young Martin Luther, before he kind of had to defend his turf and became what we call polemical or argumentative, or in the terms of the divisions and the meanness that can go on in today's world, Luther would have been right at home in all of that. Before all of that emerged in the Catholic priest Martin Luther's life, who became the namesake for the Lutherans, he wrote some materials that reflect this very peace-filled priest named Meister Eckhart. And anyway, that's an aside, but something for us. I'm for those of you who like to read, I want you to know I'm using this book to guide me in these weeks. It is not an assignment. I wanted to create these groups so that you don't have to do anything to participate except show up. But if you like to read, this is a pastor that actually Ann was acquainted with before me. And I think Ann has had some exposure to her as a preacher and as a retreat leader. Holly Whitcomb, the 7 spiritual gifts of waiting. This season of Advent that we're in is called the season of waiting, as we await the celebration once again of the birth of Christ, and we ask that Christ would be born again in our lives. So that's a little bit of an introduction to where we are in spending this time together. As I was reading Holly Whitcomb's book, it was interesting to hear her describe this, what is called the 5th group gift of waiting, as gratitude. You know, back to that Meister Eckhart prayer, if the only prayer we ever offer is thank you, it will be enough. She says that one thing we can discover in waiting, a gift that we can receive in waiting, is to discover and to further develop the gift of gratitude. Her introductory statements were interesting to me. Now, this book was written 15 years ago. So you'd think it would be out of touch with what we're going through right now. But she says sometimes when you're waiting, you can find unexpected moments or unexpected developments that can make you grateful. You're waiting in line and you don't want to be waiting in line at the grocery store, but you're at once grateful for the food that you are able to have and for the people that you will be able to share that food with. You're waiting at the corner and you notice some of the beautiful decorations that are around you, or you notice some of the interesting people that you are encountering. Then she has this odd phrase, which seemed weird when you think 15 years ago. Why would she say, we're waiting, and aren't we lucky we're going through this now rather than 10 years ago? Now think of that. She wrote that 15 years ago. We're waiting, and aren't we lucky we're going through this now rather than 10 years ago? I have thought about that relative to this COVID experience. You know, if we were going through this 10 years ago, we likely would not be having this opportunity to grow in being a church, both in person and online. Holly Whitcomb was going through a depression at a certain time, not clinical, she said, but it was out of sorts for her. She found her life to be, she said, I'm normally enjoying getting up and getting going, but there was a period of time where I just was not. And I talked to a friend about what was going on in my life and why was this happening. And she said her friend invited her to ask herself this question: what might God be wanting to teach you in this time? What might God want to teach you in this time of what you're going through? And she realized that there were some things that she needed to deal with in her life and talk through and think through. She had a person that she was reading and studying at the time as a pastor who said, well, I'll share my screen again so you can see the reference. Again, for those of you who like to read, there's some resources and whatnot that you can find here. I'm going to jump up to this slide right here. The author, Christina Baldwin, who said, life is a great unending opportunity to see things differently, to keep reframing disaster and discouragement into faith. Isn't that an interesting thought? Life, an opportunity to see things differently, continually an opportunity to see things differently, to keep reframing disaster and discouragement into faith. I haven't read this author before. I just only encountered her in preparing for this group. But I look at the books she's written and I think about our, what is really a heart and soul of what we try to be as a church, where people are in touch with the stories of their life and share them with others, and are in touch with God's story and see an intersection between God's story and the Bible and the story of their own life. And they make sense of it and they find meaning and purpose and value. Interesting book, maybe I should try to read, Story Catcher, Making Sense of Our Lives Through the Power and Practice of Story. Anyway, Christina Baldwin. So life is a great unending opportunity to see things differently, to keep reframing disaster and discouragement into faith. In other words, God invites us to be in touch with what we're going through and to ask ourselves, what might God want us to see now? Or maybe a better way to ask that is, how might God want us to see? And wanted to bring us into a scripture here so you can see this Beatitudes, right? Everybody there with me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do this the best, but I'd rather not have one person read the whole thing. However, I'm sure we're not going to see the same people on the screen to be able to call on each other. So I think what I'm going to do is invite us to take turns reading a verse, and I'll try to call on you. So listen for your name, read along, and make sure you're not muted. And read deliberately. Don't feel like you have to be in a rush. If you want to not read because you can't see the screen or whatever, you just say pass. There's no shame in passing. Remember, in our small groups, we invite people to share things all the time because we know that we all have a story and we all have things to offer, but it's never wrong to pass. It's always okay to say, leave me alone, Greg. I don't want to. All right. So I'm just going to go down the line here and invite Angela to start us off and read just verse 1.
When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him.
And Scott, verse 2.
Then he began to speak and taught them, saying,
And Nancy?
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Anne?
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Carol?
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Doug?
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Sue?
Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy.
Marianne?
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
And Judy?
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
And Angela again.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Scott?
Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account.
Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So imagine yourself in the crowd on this day, and this is considered to be Jesus' first recorded full-length sermon. And Matthew and Luke give a great deal of attention to the message. Matthew's exposition or teaching of Jesus' Beatitudes continues for a couple of chapters. So it's a major content to the life of Jesus that we have recorded. And it made a huge impact on the 12 followers of Jesus. And of course, we know that there were many more than 12 who were exposed to Jesus, not the least of which are the crowds that are referred to today. As you imagine looking around yourself in this crowd, what can you say about the people that Jesus was speaking to this day? What would you imagine to be the characteristics of the people that Jesus was speaking to this day? What were they like? And I don't need to call on anybody, but anybody who's bold can jump in. What was the crowd like? What was the audience like that Jesus was speaking to?
Well, probably poor, I would expect, and kind of they were under the thumb of the Roman government, so they were probably somewhat fearful and just needing hope, I guess.
I think they're picked on people. People that are being persecuted, they're downtrodden. They need to be lifted up.
Mhm. Right, they were the common people of the
Common.
day, and I think very needy. They were looking for something. I think they were trying to get something hopeful in their life and grasping for that and wanting that.
What else might we imagine? That's really helpful. What might they have been mourning? Blessed are those who mourn.
Makes sense.
It's a really helpful image that you brought, Nancy, that these were a people that were under the thumb of this empire. And they were not citizens, which meant that their rights were always subordinate to the ruling empire. And
then they would be mourning freedom.
mourning freedom.
I don't know, had the persecution started at that time? I mean, I know they were, as followers of Jesus, were they persecuted yet, or was that yet to come?
That's a really good question. I've studied this a bit, but not in an ability to give you a specific timeline. However, there were constant tensions around what you just described as persecuted. Obviously, beginning with the subjugation of the area itself, which was just one long series of foreign powers that occupied Israel from right around 700 or 800 years before Jesus, beginning with the ancestors of the Syrians, the Assyrians, and then the Babylonians, the ancestors of Iraq, giving way to the Persians, the ancestors of Iran, and then the Romans.
Well, even at Jesus's birth, they were under Herod.
Indeed, and that was an expression of the Roman Empire. And within 70 years of Jesus' birth, there would be a violent crushing of a revolt that would lead again to the destruction of the temple, which was the heart and soul of the people. And then another 200 years after that, as the Roman Empire was eroding, there was yet another rebellion and another violent crushing of these areas. So it's probably impossible to imagine that there wasn't constantly undercurrents. We know that this is part of the aspect, first of all, of the betrayal of Jesus under Judas, who was believed to have thought that Jesus' primary purpose was to be a political overthrow. And he was trying to get things moving and expecting that that Jesus would finally rise up as the earthly David again. We know that Pontius Pilate, coming into Jerusalem eventually at the end of Jesus' earthly life, was purely coming because the time of the Pentecost was an annual time where the rebellions became an issue again. And so this is clearly part of the whole reality. What is Jesus doing as he speaks to these persecuted, mourning, poor in spirit? And by the way, when Luke translates this sermon, he doesn't bother to put spirit in there. He says, blessed are the poor. So, right in Jesus' community, they had two memories of exactly what did he say. And we'd probably be wise to say that we shouldn't live in this dualistic idea that it's either you're physically poor or you're spiritually poor, but those two are connected. But what is Jesus doing in the lives of these people as he preaches into them?
So he's starting to give them hope. He's starting to give them something to look forward to, something that they're going to be blessed with.
A sense of purpose.
Mhm. You know, all this waiting that they've been having is maybe gonna be having a long-term positive effect. Something good might be coming. They've been, waiting so long.
What might Jesus, or what is Jesus doing as he preaches into these people, as he speaks to them?
I think he lets them know he sees them. You know, I relate. I think I understand. I, want to let you know you're important.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. They're valued as individuals, because at that time they probably didn't feel a lot of value in that society. So he was making them feel more like they were God's people and they were valued.
It's a powerful thing to be able to notice and to be able to see, and then for someone to be seen. I've had 3 or 4 online memorial services in the last few months, which is an odd thing, right? You think of memorials and funerals, and of course, Marianne joined me for one of them. Now that's why she's a veteran of Zooming. But it was interesting in a recent funeral that the person whose life we were celebrating had a knack in daily life of noticing people that were around her. For example, at a restaurant, she would be a returning guest and she would remember the wait staff, and she would learn their names, and she'd learn their kids' names, and she'd ask about their kids. And Anne's mom had a real knack for noticing and caring for people in such a context. It looks to me like Jesus, there's a reference I should look up. Maybe it's the Luke reference. Jesus looked on them with compassion, which is a really powerful biblical word. It means that his heart, his stomach, they turned over in care for the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems pretty clear that he really, these people probably would have felt very loved. It's interesting that, these powerful words that we have to share over the centuries are so impactful, but it's likely that even more than the words, what the people felt in Jesus, they just felt in him being with them. That's what gave the words life. There's a wonderful preacher author of preaching books named Fred Craddock, who says that it's pretty clear that the people that Jesus was speaking to in this first historic recorded sermon, that they were victims. There's really no way around understanding the history and the context of what it meant to live in that time and to be people who were, every day was survival. But when Jesus spoke to them, he delivered them from a victim mentality. Think about that. So he's speaking to people who are victimized by circumstances in life. Stuff just happened that was beyond their control. But he spoke to them in a way that delivered them from a victim mentality. He invited them to not be trapped by their circumstances, but to recognize God in the midst of their circumstances and God's grace, God's love, and to look for possibilities. And to explore their possibilities of growth and even strangely flourishing. So remember that what we're thinking about in this brief time today is about the gift of gratitude in waiting. The gift of gratitude in waiting. This book is, again, I'm not expecting people to read it or study it, but if you like to read this Diana Butler Bass has written a number of things that I really have been helped with over the years and want to bring some. I'm looking at a resource possibly in our Lenten journey coming up that is pretty encouraging to me. So stay tuned, possibility. But anyway, the transformative power of giving thanks. The transformative power of giving thanks. So there have been a lot of studies about becoming people of gratitude, people who are able to reframe what's going on in their life in a way that gets past being a victim or being incapacitated by what's happening. And clearly it's what God wants us to feel in our relationship with him, to be very empowered. And these scientific studies, literally, these are people that study brains and bodies and, what makes people healthy and well, is that learning to practice gratitude, learning to be thankful is powerful. It is motivating. It literally has been shown to alter people's brain chemistry towards being positive and healthy. It has an effect of, they call it oiling the circuits of your brain, keeping things moving when you practice gratitude. And, when we did the Thanksgiving thing last week, I invited people to list 3 things that they're thankful for. And I invited them to send a note or a phone call to somebody that they thought would be especially alone and, be thankful for them. Mary Ann mentions this powerful thing that Jeannie Coughlin has put together. I'm not sure if we're up to some 70 families or 70 family units or individuals and families that are not necessarily homebound, but especially alone. And always when you do that as a church, there's a risk that you're overlooking somebody. So let us know if we've overlooked anybody that you think should have been included, or I'm sure we still have resources we can put together. All of that's going out today, by the way. If I'm not mistaken, today Jeannie Coughlin is trying to move all of these gifts. Those physical intentional acts of gratitude and generosity are powerful in terms of altering our brain chemistry. But let me point to something a little simpler even. Gratitude can be as simple as appreciating your morning coffee. Gratitude can be as simple as
Well, Nancy knows I love coffee.
Oh, me too.
Me too.
And I love delivering it.
gratitude is as simple as noticing what's outside your window, or as simple as enjoying your meal. There's a guy named Walt Whitman, a poet, who wrote, happiness is not in another place, but in this place, not for another hour, but for this hour. Happiness is not in another place, but in this place. Not for another hour, but for this hour.
You know, I gotta tell you, yesterday I was driving and on Rawson and going east, and the clouds over the lake they looked like mountains, and the cars. It was crazy because I'm not an artist. My husband was, but I felt like I wanted to pick up a paintbrush and paint what I was seeing. It was so beautiful. The cars moving in front of me, and the mountain look, and I thought, geez, maybe I should take up a course on art or something. maybe I could become an artist in my old age. And I was grateful for that, Pastor, for that look.
Carol, try finding something on YouTube. It'll help you paint.
Great.
There's a little class right on YouTube.
Really? Well, if I knew how to find YouTube. I'm terrible with computers.
Said the other day, he's a singer, rapper, and he said, the pandemic has been awesome for us creatives. And I thought, it's not just for people that are artists. All of a sudden, we all have time to think, what is my creativity going to be today? Right?
And that's true.
Yeah.
But I sure would like somebody to come and help me with computers. I have a new printer and I don't know how to install it. Oh dear. I'll have to get my girls over.
I wish we all had one.
Greg, you're muted.
Carol, I was going to say the first people to teach you will be your grandkids. So get them over.
Oh, yes.
With the computers. Yes. Yeah.
So that's really a healthy segue to how I want to draw this towards a close. Let's keep talking a little bit about things that we are grateful for, even in these tough times. What are some things that we're grateful for, even in these tough times?
I'm grateful for my daughter because she calls me every day.
No.
I'm grateful for Zoom because I am doing yoga with a friend in upstate New York, and I would have never done that had we just continued on with life. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic forced us. Again, I never wish this on anyone, but now I see her quite often, twice a week, and that would have never happened before. So Zoom help me connect with people that I would not normally see for a long time.
I agree with you, Judy. A similar situation. I've reconnected with college friends from 50 years ago and high school friends that I had lost touch with. And we've reconnected via video chat as well. And it's been a great thing. I mean, people are spread out all over the country, all over the world in some instances. And it's really helped to bring us back together and realize we still had that relationship going. So it's been very helpful. I agree with you.
And I think too that the pandemic may have changed my point of view of what I'm grateful for. I mean, I've always been grateful for family and friends, but I think with the pandemic and the way it's taking people's lives and the sicknesses and all that, I'm more thankful and grateful for the health of our families, the health of, and my mother who did contract COVID, thankfully had a very mild case and has thoroughly recovered. And at 92 years old,
Oh my goodness.
we all know the age factor there in the COVID. So it's changed a tad my gratitude and thankfulness for the health and well-being of family and friends.
I agree that technology has really been a blessing throughout this. And not only Zoom, but I now play Mahjong once a week with friends, you know, through a program, and I'm initiating my grandkids into a program called Trickster, where we can play card games and talk to each other as we're playing. So in some ways, you know, it's bringing people from farther apart together that we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Good thoughts.
You're better at computers, Nancy.
Well, and I'm thankful, Greg, for you and the staff at Atonement for all that you have done to go above and beyond to, you know, make sure that people are staying connected and the word is getting out and that we are still maintaining the body of Christ through all this, that we are reaching out to one another and in different ways, of course, not in person, but that we are still staying connected to the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
My daughter that calls me, she is concerned because she belongs to a Catholic church and they, you know, that they have had COVID, but she's still concerned about getting it again or spreading it or whatever. So she is reluctant to go to church and they're being told that they need to be in person. And so I am thankful for the technology that we have, that we can do this. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church maybe doesn't have the ability to do that or doesn't feel that they should do that for them.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
I think that's very interesting because I have a dear friend in Florida who is not only a member of the Catholic Church, but is a sister in the Catholic Church, a nun.
Yeah.
And we had a recent conversation and they had resumed in-person services. And she was struggling with her feelings of, you know, how she had found a way of staying connected by using a computer and stuff like that to attend services. And she still does not, she is high risk, like many of us are, not only by age, but other things. And she is really, you know, afraid to go to church in person. And she feels for so many other people who are in the same boat. But she has chosen not to attend in person, and I think is carrying a great load of guilt because of it.
Mm.
So I just, want to throw that out there.
Well, thank you all for sharing. And I think one of the things that we're discovering about the being the church in this age, as I said earlier, it's been an opportunity. Somebody said that the church has been online for a long time. It just took a pandemic for Atonement to discover that.
Mm.
And of course, not only Atonement, but others. And again, we tend to live in a world that says it's either this or that, but especially among the young generation, and I'm not, certainly people like Carol's grandkids can teach her more and more, and she's really wise to be curious and to learn and to stretch, and we all are. But what's reality today is that it's not that there is this separation between our in-person world and our online world. These, we carry these computers in our hand and we're on them all the time. Most people nowadays, and more younger, hours every day. So there's not a separation between online and in person. We have to begin to realize that. And obviously we can waste a lot of time here and we can get involved in things that are not helpful, but we also can be intentional about realizing how the Holy Spirit is working and erasing the idea that it's one or the other. Well, I'm going to draw us to a close. We're pushing an hour here. I just want to remind you that I will do this again next week. Next week, we may have a few. I know there's a couple that have signed up. I am dovetailing this Together Waiting with what we've annually done as a Blue Christmas, an opportunity for people that are experiencing the holiday season as an intersection also with their grief or in a sense of loss. We're going to be, the theme we'll be lifting up next week is looking at what happens when we lose control in our life and how does that impact waiting, the gift of waiting. When we lose control, which seems maybe to be an oxymoron or something that doesn't, there's a disconnect between there being losing control and it being a gift. But that's what we dig into next week. And as I say, I'll repeat this tonight. So if you know somebody that missed it, that you'd like to be live, I'm going to record it. Hopefully this recording now, I'll stop recording at this point, and we will